It was not uncommon for the Grand Chamber of the United Nations in New York City to be the scene of a number of bold statements, diplomatic negotiations that heated the pot, and ideological battles that were intense. On this particular day, however, the room was filled with a peculiar and disturbing hush. It was not out of reverence, but rather out of shock that the silence was present. The president of Burkina Faso, Ibrahim Traoré, had just finished serving his term at this same moment. There is not a single note. In the absence of a teleprompter, if there are no diplomatic filters present, you need only set it ablaze it. As if they were the combat drums that are played in the Sahel, his words resonated throughout the entire location. His final remarks were able to simultaneously cut through millennia of exploitation and layers of dishonesty, since they were as follows. As a laboratory, you should not use Africa as a location. We are not a representative of your experiment that was unsuccessful. We are here to serve as a constant reminder that you will be remembered by history. Upon completion of his performance, he departed without waiting for the crowd to applaud his work. For the first chapter, which is titled The World Watches. This summit proceeded in the same manner as every other summit. The hall of the United Nations General Assembly was packed with delegates who were dressed in suits and national apparel that was tailored to fit precisely. They collected themselves beneath the sparkling chandeliers. The world's most powerful people had gotten together to discuss a variety of topics, including global aid, climate change, and the importance of working together to facilitate growth. However, news quickly spread among diplomats that Traoré would be speaking today. This information was rapidly disseminated. The youthful military leader, who was only in his mid-30s at the time, had become a symbol of resistance across the continent of Africa. He was just at the beginning of his career. Because of his rise to power in Burkina Faso, Western diplomats felt uneasy, nationalist groups were invigorated, and a sense of Pan-Africanism that had been dormant for decades was rekindled. All of these things occurred as a direct result of his rise to power. A great number of individuals had the expectation that he would deliver a speech that was forthright yet respectful. They were clueless about what was going to take place after that. A chapter titled The Silence Before the Storm is the second one in the book. Immediately after Traoré took the stage, there was a noticeable shift in the mood of the audience. The eyes of a few individuals rolled. Other people moved closer to the speaker. Despite the fact that he was not clothed in a Western suit, but rather in olive military fatigues that were embroidered with a single medal with a Burkinabe flag patch, Traoré stood with a calm yet furious dignity. He was standing in the middle of the room. The diplomats from France, the United States of America, and the United Kingdom were the subjects of his attention for a longer period of time, as he took a glance around the room. And at that moment, he started talking. The beginning of the speech is covered in Chapter 3. Thank you for your time, Mr. Secretary General, distinguished delegates, brothers and sisters of the southern parts of the world. My remarks are not prepared. Rather, I speak with the unfiltered voice of a continent that is sick of being polite. I do not speak with words that have been prepared. Over the course of history, Africa has been subjected to exploitation, plundering, and cutting for a very long time. Initially, let's talk about chains, and then we'll move on to contracts. Now, with climate pledges and economic aid that binds us more securely than any colonial yoke ever could, we are in a much more perilous position than we were before. A gasp was let forth. A faint murmur was heard uttering. The one who made the first move was Traoré. In your discussion of development, you behave as if we are nothing more than children who are in need of guidance. In spite of the fact that you are working behind the scenes to assist coups, you continue to preach about stability. You make claims about democracy, but you choose to overlook the truth that elected African leaders are being killed or sanctioned because they refuse to bend or bow down. You choose to disregard this fact. I want to make it absolutely clear that Africa is not your laboratory at this time. I want to emphasize this repeatedly. The discussion of flashpoints can be found in Chapter 4. Traoré unleashed a barrage of truths that very few individuals had the fortitude to speak about in that environment. including the following. He was made aware of the fact that pharmaceutical companies were dumping vaccinations and pharmaceuticals that had expired and had not been examined across the continent of Africa. He made the claim that Western think institutions were using African nations as guinea pigs for the purpose of conducting ideological and economic experiments. He further stated that this was being done deliberately, bringing to light the fact that green energy loans were accompanied by stipulations that pushed countries to give up their resources in exchange for getting debt traps was something that he did. Your weapons have been found in the possession of terrorists who are responsible for blowing up our towns, despite the fact that you claim to be responsible for combating terrorism in the Sahel region. Although you make assurances of peace, you are actually selling firearms within the confines of the embassy. There was an attempt made by a representative from France to interrupt the conversation. I am curious about Traoré's response. Nervousness is present. It is imperative that you bring up the teeth of Patrice Lumumba whenever you are speaking. Please make reference to the blood of Sankara. In the event that this is not the case, I would like to request that you, in the midst of the silence that your policies have caused for my people, refrain from speaking. The temperature of the cage dropped to an icy level. The 5th chapter of Africa's Open Wound is presented here. During that particular portion of the speech, Traoré elevated it to a level that was really personal. I am from a place where children are going to perish because they are unable to afford medicine that is less expensive than the lunch that your diplomat consumes. I come from a country where this is happening. I am the governor of a country in which mothers bury their kids not because of natural disasters, but because they live in close proximity to gold mines that are owned by foreign firms. This is the reason why I am the leader of this nation. To be more specific, he indicated the direction of the delegation representative from Belgium. Even while you are talking about progress, we are still dealing with the scars that your so-called civilization has caused. Our rivers have been poisoned, our leaders have been duped, our currencies have been controlled, and our dignity has been traded for spreadsheets from the International Monetary Fund. The atmosphere in the room was characterized by a distinct sense of discomfort. Traoré's tone, on the other hand, continues to become more authoritative. Despite the fact that you talk about carbon footprints, the fact of the matter is that it was your factories, your industries, and your wars that were responsible for the intensification of darkness in our skies. At the same time that you are supporting transactions that involve deforestation under other identities, you are now instructing us to plant trees while you are performing these actions. Chapter 6 represents the beginning of the emergence of a new order. After recognizing the hypocrisy, Traoré shifted his focus to vision, which he described as follows. This is not a place where we seek pity. We do not require a donation from a nonprofit organization. We are looking for justice if we are to succeed. Specifically, we aim to make a plea for sovereignty. What we are going to do is take charge of the situation. He made the statement that a coalition of states that are getting ready to adopt an African sovereignty pact will be formed. Military bases that are located in other nations should be rejected. Contracts on the mining industry that are exploitative ought to be renegotiated. It is recommended that a Pan-African monetary fund be established rather than the CFA franc as the default currency. The establishment of regional security forces that are not subject to the control of either Russia or NATO. In the areas of agriculture, technology, and pharmaceuticals, it is necessary to establish research and development laboratories that are directed by Africans. It will not be required for us to choose between the East and the West. We will not have to compromise. We have made the decision to travel to Africa. Additionally, we are able to find our own way. When the African delegates stood up for the very first time, they did it not in a manner of applause, but rather in a manner that was rather subdued and respectful. Following that, Traoré continued, "If there is a leader in this room who is concerned about losing control because their followers heard my voice, then it is possible that they are not qualified to lead." In Chapter 7, there is a backlash as well as thunderous thunder. The whirlwind of media coverage experienced an almost instantaneous outburst of activity. It has been reported by Western media outlets that his rhetoric has been described as aggressive, radical, and dangerous. Researchers from think tanks began publishing publications that offered an analysis of the rise of militaristic populism in Africa. These articles were sent to potential readers. The opposite side of the continent, if you will. There is no doubt that it was a lightning strike. A significant number of individuals gathered in the vicinity of the Parliament building in Accra, where his speech was being broadcast through loudspeakers. "We Choose Africa" was painted on murals of Traoré that were created by young groups from Mali and displayed in Bamako. These murals were displayed in the capital city of Mali. Students from several educational institutions in Nairobi participated in discussions over the African Sovereignty Pact, which took place in the city. Not only Traoré had spoken, but others had as well. He awoke all of a sudden. It is the subject of Chapter 8 that the power of unapologetic truth is discussed. After the occurrence, there was a flurry of diplomatic messages and rushed envoys. This occurred in the weeks that followed the catastrophe. Traoré was the recipient of clandestine phone calls from a number of African governments, which contained requests for their participation in his alliance. Others were cautious because they were concerned about the reaction they might receive. On the other hand, the change in consciousness was something that could not be reversed, no matter how hard one tried. Through the use of his words, Traoré had brought to the notice of the entire world the truths that millions of individuals had been keeping quietly to themselves. "You have a fear of our coming together. It is our memory that we are terrified of. Your fear is that we shall become conscious again." As of this moment, the fire had already started to spread. "The Meeting Behind Closed Doors" is the title of Chapter 9, which can be found in the book. There was a secret meeting that took place 2 hours following the speech, but the information that was discussed in this meeting was not made public to the general public. The United Nations Security Council had reserved a small room for Traoré, and 5 Western leaders who were visibly concerned met with him under the guise of dialogue. Traoré was present for this meeting. "Do you truly believe that your model is sustainable?" was a question that was posed by one of their employees in a cold and demanding tone. However, there was no indication that Traoré was winking. The preservation of the environment is not the focus of this. The problem is one of respect for one's dignity. The idea of dignity is not something that can be deliberated upon. An other person put out the idea of cooperation. Cooperation? Number? Doesn't that constitute control? African nations are going to collaborate, but first they will work together. The gathering was over in a flash, and it was over. Despite the fact that Traoré was leaving, his final remarks continued to ring like a prophecy. In the course of history, civilizations have not been brought down by swords. As a result of the truth, all of them fall. "And I just handed you a mirror," she replied. "I hope you enjoy it." The 10th chapter is titled "The Launch of the Legacy." When he returned to Burkina Faso, the people there greeted him with a variety of emotions, including dances, tears, and cheers. There were elders who had lived through colonialism during their lifetimes, and they referred to it as the Second Independence. A stream of phrases from the address were shared by young people on TikTok and Twitter. These phrases were included in the flow of the speech. The percentage of those who approved of him reached unprecedented heights. In addition to this, his lecture served as the impetus for a series of awakenings, which included the following. Ghana's negotiations with a mining company based in Europe have been put on hold for the time being. Gambia has said that it will conduct an investigation into all of the assets that are owned by France. By the year 2027, Senegal has declared its intention to exit from the CFA franc, as stated in the announcement. The establishment of a Pan-African bank with its headquarters in Bamako took place in a relatively short period of only months. The words, "the roar that never does fade," are used in the epilogue. Throughout the years that followed, Traoré's speech would be dissected in academic institutions, debated in legislative bodies, and engraved into the annals of textbooks. All of these things would take place. It was said that he was careless by other people. Only a few individuals are revolutionary. However, there was one thing that could not be refuted. On that particular day, while Ibrahim Traoré was standing at that podium, he brought to the attention of the world the fact that Africa was no longer a solitary voice of resistance. The sound was a commotion that was packed with memories. It was not with permission or apologies that a continent was growing. Rather, it was with dominance. There was no attempt made to provide an apology. In the beginning, there was a sentence that broke through the marble walls of diplomacy, and that sentence was exactly the one that broke through. As a laboratory, you should not use Africa as a location.